Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon, everyone. You are listening to, you are witnessing, you are watching Humanity in the Headlines. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am your host, Atiba Buchanan. I am joined and flanked by my main man, my confidant, my friend, my mentor, Mr. David Seaton. How are you, sir?
You went there with mentor.
You are.
I'm the mentee. He hit it hard with the mentor.
This guy has been teaching me for years. Please get out of here, man.
Teaching one another.
Absolutely. It has been a phenomenal 27-year relationship.
It has been. You just told everybody how old we are.
Right. Oh my goodness. So as you can see, good people, we are feeling good today. We are glad to be here, and we are thankful, so thankful that you are joining us on IntellectualRadio.com, on YouTube, on Facebook Live. We just thank you for your participation today. Of course, on Facebook Live, for everybody that's watching, please feel free to share the show with anyone you think it may benefit today. We have a lot for you today that we are excited to get to. So let's talk about what we got, Dave. We've got to talk about these police shootings. We've got to talk about the lack of justice from the subsequent shootings. And we'll try and get to an action plan. Oh, you've got some things you'd like to get off your chest today.
Definitely.
Yeah. So I look forward to hearing it because I don't know what it is. So for all you people, I'm going to be just as surprised as you guys are. But I know my main man, David, has something he'd like to say today, something that needs to be said. Not even that he liked, something that needs to be said. So we're going to get to that later today, but we're definitely going to talk about these police shootings. If we get time, we will also talk about the Laura Ingalls initiated by the Parkland survivor, David Bogg.
David Hogg.
Is it? It is Hogg.
Hogg.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you. So we got to talk about that today. We got a lot coming up in the second half of the show. We will talk about how the United States imprisons the poor. And we're going to talk about finances and the Black community in general. We've got an excellent guest for that coming up later in the second half of the show. We're going to tease that a little bit more as we get closer, but you do not want to miss that. We've got a lot to talk about, very little time to cover it. And you do not want to miss this show. So thank you so much for joining us on Humanity and the Headlines on IntellectualRadio.com. We are going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we will discuss justice or the lack thereof in America. Thank you for listening to Humanity and the Headlines. We'll be right back. We are back on Humanity in the Headlines. Earl, my mic sounds really good. I just had to give you credit where credit was due. It makes me sound better than I actually sound. So anytime that happens, I'm grateful. People actually think I'm supposed to be on the radio today. So, Dave, you and I we haven't spoken much this week, and I kind of wanted to keep it fresh for the show. So I know a lot of what we say today is going to be new to each other's ears. But I know my friend, and you and I have had these types of conversations plenty in the past. So we're going to start with the latest shooting, at least the one to get national attention, because bear in mind, since this shooting of Mr. Stephen Clark, the police in America have killed at least 27 more people. So this is just the latest one to spark national attention. And in this case, this is if you could kind of catch our listeners up in case they've just been busy with their lives, can't catch up with the news. If you could just kind of tell them a little bit about Stephen Clark, how this happened. This is the gentleman that shot in his backyard. Catch us, and then we'll talk about the latest information on his autopsy.
The information or the story happened where this gentleman, this young African American male, I believe he was 19.
22.
22. Okay. Stephen Clark, he's running through the neighborhood.
Reportedly.
Reportedly, correct. Because they show the footage of a helicopter, and they've got an IR camera. So it's a heat sensing camera. And you see the outline or the silhouette of someone who's running through the neighborhood and jumping a fence. The original call to the police was that there was someone going around who was breaking car windows. So when the police officers show up, one white, one black police officer, they show up, find this young man in his grandmother's backyard where he was living. So he was supposed to be there. That was his place of residence. When the body cams turn on, all you hear the police say is, "Stop, don't move. He's got a gun," and they immediately start shooting. So they both unload a clip on him. So he was shot at 20 times by 10 bullets coming from each police officer's gun. Subsequent to that event, you hear the police officers talking, and they mute their body cams. So there's some conversation that's going on between the police officers that obviously they don't want to be recorded. And then later on, there was some confusion because the first report from the police officers was they thought he had a gun. Then it was they thought he had a crowbar. And it turns out they found out, no, it wasn't a gun. It wasn't a crowbar. It was a cell phone. That brings and so again, there've been a lot of protests and marching. The low residents have been going to the stadium where the Sacramento Kings play, right?
Yep.
They were boycotting or protesting there. The police has come out, said, hey, the police officers acted within their police authority. They acted within guidelines. There's no plans right now for these police officers to be disciplined for having murdered this young man.
So since then, and this initially happened on March 18th, and we are at the end of the month, the 31st.
We are.
Right. So basically, what's happened now, we've had the autopsy, and thank you for that for that summation. Dr. Bennett Amalu, who conducted the 3-hour autopsy, this is according to Yahoo News, told reporters that Clark was struck 8 times. 6 of the bullets hit Clark directly in the back, with a 7th bullet hitting him in the side of his back, and I think the first one was in his arm. Yeah, there was an 8th bullet in the arm. Clark did not immediately die. Death took 3 to 10 minutes, according to the coroner. It was not an instantaneous death, quote. So now that gives us an idea of the agony that this man went through. This gives us the idea of the suffering, because I think it's being reported, and I think the word I meant to use at the top of your summation was allegedly. Allegedly, he was I don't know that that's been confirmed that he was the one that was doing it.
Correct.
Right. So with all of that said, and then now allegedly or reportedly, the officers did not immediately administer aid to Mr. Clark, which we've seen.
Busy cuffing him.
Right. And we've seen that time and time again as well. So now we get an idea of someone shot in the back 8 times. And assuming he was the person that was, again, I don't think vandalism, I don't think the punishment for vandalism is death in the street.
I actually checked the criminal code. You are correct. That if you are arrested, tried, and convicted of vandalism, the punishment issued by the state is not death.
Right.
Death by the state.
So,
you are correct.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. So again, as I'm imagining myself, and he was a father, of course, he's a father of 2, 22, whatever. He left a woman he was involved with and 2 young children. And that's just hurtful. to think about how he died on top of why he died. And it just begs the question. And then on top of all that, for them to immediately be able to say, well, no, the officers didn't do anything outside of code or anything wrong. At what point do we allow a jury to figure that out? But I don't even like asking that question because I have absolutely zero confidence that a jury would ever find cops guilty of shooting, white cops guilty of shooting black people, armed or unarmed.
Well, again, I think the race of the police officer fades into the background because the officers that shot this young man in Sacramento, one of them was white, one of them was black.
Okay.
We had a shooting in Houston in the last 48 hours. African-American man walking down the street. His girlfriend had just killed two of his children. His girlfriend's in jail. He's reported to have been very depressed. He's walking down the street with his pants at his ankles, and he's bumping cars as he's passing them. He bumps a car, gentleman jumps out, they get into a scuffle, policeman shows up, tells the guy, get on the ground, shoots him once in the chest and kills him. That officer was an African American. So a lot of times we've framed this argument as a race argument in terms of racism, the feelings of racism by the police officers against black and brown people. And I think we can say at this point that that's not really the issue so much as the perception or the devaluation of black and brown life. If you are a black man, you're automatically perceived as either a threat and or the value of your life is so low that police officers feel like in the field they can make the decision to be judge, jury, and executioner, and they are backed up by the police departments, the politicians, and I dare say the president in today's political climate.
The only P you forgot was the public.
The public. The white public.
Right. Well, and I agree with you for the most part on everything that you said. However, what happens is, and we just had it happen this week, the Somali officer in Minnesota, I think Mohammed Moore was his name. He has been charged with murder. They threw the book at him. They charged him with manslaughter, everything from manslaughter, second degree murder, first degree, like all the way through. So they can get them on anything. He's not getting off.
But that kind of underscores my point that the issue is not policemen as much as it is
who's getting shot,
the victim.
Right.
The value of life of that white woman is worth more than this young man that got killed in Sacramento. Therefore, the police officer that shot her has to be held to an account.
Exactly.
Because he took a white life.
Exactly.
And too often we tiptoe around this. The Sarah Huckabee Sanders was at a White House briefing earlier this week, and she was asked by one of the reporters, "Hey, we've got this national issue of black men being murdered by the police. What is the position of the White House?" Her response was, "Hey, this is a local issue."
Exactly. I remember saying that.
It's a local issue. And it'd be unfair of us to comment, when it's a local issue. That only and I would be inclined to agree with her. I heard a commentator say this morning on AM Joy on MSNBC that sounds eerily reminiscent of states' rights and the 10th Amendment, which is usually the clothing of a thinly veiled or racist type of position. But at the end of the day, if you look at African Americans who are killed in Chicago by the police, they're killed in Sacramento, California by the police, they're killed in Houston, they're killed in Arkansas, Ohio, New York. We could go through each one, whether we're talking about Tamir Rice, we're talking about Michael Brown, whether we're talking about Eric Garner, whether we're talking about Alton Sterling, whether we're talking about Philando Castile. Just those 5 cases happened in 5 states throughout the country, North and South. So when you can go to any police station in the country, and all of those police officers interact with African Americans in the exact same way, but then you turn around and you look at assailants like Dylan Roof, murders 9 people, taken into custody, taken to Burger King
without incident.
without incident. You look at the gentleman who, you look at
The Parkland shooting.
Parkland shooter, taken into custody. Timothy McVeigh blew up a federal building, killed hundreds of people.
168.
Taken into custody. Even Jeffrey Dahmer was taken into custody. Jeffrey Dahmer was a
8
cannibal.
people, right?
They opened up his refrigerator and he had skulls and human biceps in his refrigerator. They took him into custody. So my point is that no matter how you look at this issue across the country, for the most part, when you have a white person who commits one of these acts, the police officers do everything they can to arrest that person and take them into custody so they can go through the system. When black people are suspected of having a gun, not confirmed, suspected of having a gun and or not having a weapon at all.
In open carry states. Don't forget that.
In open carry states. But I'm talking about the gentleman who got killed in Houston. He didn't have a weapon. He was walking down the street with his pants at his ankles.
But again,
in traffic.
But it's Houston. Everybody has it's Texas, is my point. Like they'd be shooting to this day if they were just shooting at everybody with a weapon.
But my point is that this gentleman who just got killed in Houston didn't even have a weapon.
Right.
This young man who got killed in Sacramento. Oh, we thought he had a gun. The police officers didn't even say police. They didn't even announce themselves as police. If this gentleman had a gun and he's walking through his backyard on his property and 2 people roll up on him in the dark, he has every right to defend himself because he doesn't know who these 2 men are. They didn't even announce themselves as police officers. So again, the issue is, at the end of the day, it's not the police. It's no longer fair to say all police are white racists and that's why this is happening. That's not the issue. The issue is the devaluation of black lives, specifically black male lives. And whether the officer is black or white, or I think the officer who killed Philando Castile in Minnesota, he was Asian.
Well, correct. And again, that's where the mantra Black Lives Matter was born, because we're talking. Again, as you say, we've progressed about the conversation being about the racism or the implicit biases of individual police officers. We are talking about a system that devalues black life. Therefore, it doesn't matter the color of the shooter, because they are and trying and what their role is designed to do. Let's talk about some of the comments from the mayor. We've
got some people that are, for those of you who are watching on Facebook, have a question or a comment, please post it. We'd love to get your participation.
So this is something I'm reading from. Let me go back to the top. This is from CBS News. Sacramento mayor talks about implied racism, an undeniable factor in police shootings. But that's generally what was said. Specifically, let's get into some of the specifics of this. In the wake of the shooting death of Stephen Clark by Sacramento police, the city's mayor said Wednesday that implied racism is behind police shootings. Clark was shot to death in his grandmother's backyard last week, and officers said they believed he was carrying a gun, but it only turned out to be that he was holding a cell phone. The mayor said, quote, "I do not believe that our police force is racist in any way," end quote, said Mayor Darrell Steinberg on CBSN. I don't think that's I don't think that's intended, but I do think that implied racism is an undeniable factor in the way these sorts of tragedies play out, not just in Sacramento, but throughout the country. What's the difference between being racist and implied racism? I don't understand what he's saying there.
I guess he's parsing there, trying to make a distinction between implied or bias. But that was the whole phrase that Hillary Clinton was using during the campaign when they were talking about implicit bias, as opposed to being overtly or outwardly racist or having an outward or having an overt bias. But you are correct. That distinction doesn't mean anything to these people because they're dead.
Right. And here's the thing, because when he says the first line of what he says, I do not believe our police force is racist in any way. We know that he has to say that. He's playing his role when he says that, because if he doesn't say that, then he's going to have to deal with an unruly police force and police union that will no longer be cooperative in everything that the city needs done. So again, you can't even take what these politicians say at face value, because we know there are certain things that they absolutely have to say. Immediately, I'm thinking of Bill de Blasio. I'm thinking of all the things that he had gone through in New York because of the statements the tepid statements that he made. I think about Barack Obama saying that the cop acted stupidly, and the uproar that happened over that. Daryl Steinberg, I don't know. Do you know him?
I do not.
Okay, they didn't show a picture of him in the article, so I don't know if he's white or black or whatever. But nonetheless, whatever he is, it doesn't matter, because again, you can't say that I don't believe our police force is racist in any way whatsoever, but then say that I believe implied racism played part in the shooting.
Well, again, we've had this conversation before. If anyone who is listening, again, please feel free to post your comments or questions on Facebook Live. We'd love to get your interaction in this conversation. But if we can all agree, if all intellectually honest people can agree that that there is no such thing as 0% racism in the United States, there are some racists who are out there, then you have to, by extension, accept the possibility or the probability that there are all racists don't sit at home unemployed in their basements, blogging and with Confederate flags. No, they go to work every day, and if they have a job, there's the possibility that we know there are racists out there. So there have to be some racists who are police officers, who are judges, who are attorneys, who are people who work in the jail system, who are wardens of jails, who work inside of jails. So we know, if we know that possibility, that probability exists, and we see this dynamic nationally where only African American men, and not only African American men, but African American males are disproportionately murdered by police officers. We have to, before we can actually get to a solution, we have to agree on the problem, and we can't even agree on the problem.
Right, and then in the backdrop of that problem as well is a problem with policing that extends beyond race, because again, police kill roughly between 1,100 and 1,600 people a year, and a lot of those people are white, and we have a problem again in this country with policing in general. And when I say policing, I'm specifically talking about how many people that they kill in the streets, because again, we kill 10 times, 50 times, 100 times more people than other developed countries of the world. Again, the United States Police had killed 27 more people since Stephen Clark was killed March 18th, and that was as of 4 days ago. And there are countries that don't kill 27 people a year, a decade. And so again, that we have a much bigger problem with what we've normalized and what we found acceptable, and what is status quo for us. Let's go on to the next step of what happens. So sometimes we have investigations, and they figure out if they're going to charge the cops. It took 2 years to figure out that the police officers that shot Alton Sterling will not be charged. That was a shooting in Louisiana. He was selling CDs out in front of a store. Someone made the call to 911, as always.
Now, the interesting thing is you said someone made the call. I went back and I actually read that story, since they've released the footage from the police officers that were actually their body cam footage. So it showed up 2 years later that they originally said they didn't have. The story is that Alton Sterling, while he was in front of the store, he had a small handgun in his pocket, and he showed it to a homeless guy, and the homeless guy called the police. What? Did the homeless guy have a cell phone? Did the homeless guy use the spare change that he's supposed to be using to get something to eat or whatever? And he was so aghast, he was so taken aback that Alton Sterling, the CD guy, the movie guy, had that the homeless guy went and called the police. That's strange credulity. That is preposterous. But that's the story, that's the storyline, that's the narrative out there that they're asking us to believe, because they had to come up with some kind of story about, well, how did the cops get on the scene for this situation to escalate like it did?
Right. And then the cop that shot him said he was going to shoot him
within 10 seconds
Right.
of approaching him. We had a comment online really quickly from Harlan Neal. He said it's a no-win situation for any big city mayor when something like this happens. He went on to say, here's the big question. Say for the sake of conversation, the cops involved in this shooting are investigated and found to be justified in their actions like so many others before. Then what?
Yeah, that's exactly what we're getting to. And we will answer that question in just a moment. I just want to update everyone on the latest actual news here. It looks as if the Louisiana police chief on Friday fired the white officer, and again, this is according to Yahoo News, who shot the black man during the struggle outside a convenience store. So he's been fired. The other officer has been suspended because he didn't actually fire his weapon. And it's another case where they're okay. Cities are okay with doing a couple of things. They're okay with cutting a big check. That's the thing that they're most agreeable to do, most amenable to. They will cut a big check. If the big check doesn't work, you might get a suspension without pay at best, or firing. But that doesn't mean that they won't rehire the cop after the dust is settled. What they will not do under almost any circumstance, and I think any circumstance, is convict an officer and send them to jail. And I think about the officer that shot, I think Walter Scott was his name, in the back. He went through 2 trials, they were 2 jury trials, and both trials he was acquitted. He shot this man in the back on camera, unarmed, lied about it, and juries could not bring themselves to have a unanimous decision to send this man to jail. He only went to jail on federal charges for violating his civil rights. That's still not justice. So if a guy who shoots someone in the back while he's running away, unarmed, on camera, can't get a jury to convict him, then I don't see it being possible.
I would even take it a step further. The fact, even to your point, even when a police officer is fired, all he has to do is go 2 cities up the road and he can get hired someplace else. As a matter of fact, the cachet that he'll walk in with, having murdered, that troublemaker or whatever way they use to describe them, that'll get him hired more quickly someplace else. We'd love to have you come down and join our force. We know that you're about the business. So do we want to move on to solutions really quickly?
You better, because we only got a minute.
Okay, here's some quick solutions on what we can do. I'm gonna save the one that I really want endorsed the most. I'm gonna save that one for another conversation. But here's some easy things that we can do immediately. Number 1, for those of you who are watching this show on Facebook, or you're watching this show on YouTube, or you're listening to this show on Spreaker, or you're listening to it on iHeartRadio or IntellectualRadio.com, you're listening to this live. Guess what they could do immediately with body cam footage? Have it streamed live. Have all body cam videos streamed live, so that way we don't have to worry about the video being cut and altered and held for 2 years, and the public doesn't know what's going on, and the police get to get together behind closed doors to come up with a narrative. So that's something we could do immediately, is make sure the video is streamed live. Number 2, we need to take immunity away from police officers. We need to take this immunity away so that when police officers when they do get taken to court, if they are found guilty, that they won't be able to work at another police station. They won't be able to just move 2 cities up the road. If you murder someone and you are found guilty, you can no longer be a police officer. Number 3, here's a thing that we can do that would help immediately. The police officers are the ones who are committing these acts, and a lot of times when they are sued, it's the city who has to pay that money. Guess what? Start taking that money out of those police unions, out of their retirement accounts. Start taking that money from the. It never made sense to me that if a police officer commits a crime, that it's the taxpayer who has to pick up the tab. So, in addition, or in coupling with taking away that immunity, we need to be going after these police unions to pay out on these settlements. And if you start doing that, police officers will start policing one another. Because now you go out there and you do something ill-advised, or you're impetuous, and you go out there and murder someone, and there's some huge payout that has to be made, and that money is coming out of my retirement fund. Now you're messing with my livelihood 10, 15 years from now when I retire. You're messing with my family's livelihood. So police officers would start to hold one another accountable more in the field if they had to directly feel the impact or absorb the impact monetarily of their poor decision making in the field. But those are just three things that we could do really quickly. If we want to have 100% transparent, we want to be totally transparent and have access. Let's live stream these videos. Let's take away the manual controls so the police officers can't turn their cams off or mute the speaker or whatever. All of that should be autonomous. This should be, you put your camera on, you can't turn it off. Everybody can see everything that you're doing in real time. Do that, take away their immunity, and make sure that they're held financially liable for these decisions that they're doing. That'll go a long way towards correcting the problem.
Eloquently put, sir. Appreciate the input, and I hope that's good information for our listeners. I would agree with you 100%. It's difficult when we have these situations just because of the time constraints, because hearing you say that, there's another 3 or 4 things that I'd like to add, but we genuinely are against the break. So we have to go ahead and take a break. We thank everyone for listening and for your input as well. Again, feel free to share the show with anyone you think may benefit from it. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will speak with Harrian Freeman about finances and the Black community. We'll be right back on Humanity in the Headlines on IntellectualRadio.com. We are back on Humanity in the Headlines. Thank you so much for sticking with us today. We had a very power-packed half hour. Again, talking about these police shootings, which we know, Dave, we will have to talk about again and again and again. But it gets tiresome. It really does. It weighs heavy on my heart. It weighs heavy on my mind. And sometimes I get full, but I will always find the strength to speak truth to power. And I appreciate your assistance in that as well, my friend. So we're going to switch gears a little bit today, and we got a lot to talk about, and not a whole lot of time to do it. Dave, if you could introduce our wonderful guest that is on with us today.
Joining us today is Harrian Freeman. She has helped hundreds of thousands of people generate wealth, not debt. She is one of the most trusted financial authors. Freeman is regularly featured in the media. She has appeared on ABC, Fox, and CBS. She has been featured in several major publications, including Forbes, The Wall Street Journal, Business Insider, U.S. News and World Report, Today, Time, the Fiscal Times, The Washington Post, Huffington Post, Associated Press, Shape, and more. She has been a contributor to Investopedia, Credit Donkey, PBS, and The Dollar Stretcher. She is the creator of the How to Get Out of Debt, a credit rating for free book, which offers her simple financial strategies to change or improve anyone's financial life. She has provided financial seminars nationwide to various audiences. She's a renowned financial speaker, Freeman regularly presents seminars to Fortune 500 companies, universities, civic and social organizations, and national conferences. She is the founder of H.E. Freeman Enterprises, a company that teaches financial concepts by simplifying complex terms and formula. Wow.
Right.
Harriet Freeman, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Dave, I know this is something you've been excited to talk about. You and I have had these conversations before, and I know this has been a particular point of frustration for you when talking about. Well, let's take it back even further. I remember being 18 years old. I'm going to be real transparent today. I'm just going to kind of let my hair down, Miss Freeman, and this is a Tiba, by the way. So I'm going to let my hair down a little bit, and we can kind of address this. I remember being 18, and I remember having a particular bill, and I remember getting a phone call about. I was 18 or 19, and I remember getting a phone call about the bill, and I didn't have the money to pay it. And I remember the people at the time saying to me, "If you don't pay this bill, we're going to report this to your credit bureau." And I laughed. I mean, I literally laughed like, "What?" And I had no concern. I didn't care anything about it. And then I remember about 2 years later when I was looking to buy my first car, and I sat down at the dealership, and they were like, "Hey, what's this thing?" I was like, "What are you talking about? This thing right here. It says it's been unpaid for 3 years." "Oh, really? You know about that?" So it came to bite me in the butt later. And I'm just saying that to say, while I was in high school learning all about physiology, while I was learning all about music and all this other stuff that I was learning, I didn't have any classes that taught me anything about credit. And that's one of the most valuable things. If not, I mean, that's literally like what life do you have with bad credit? I can speak from experience that it's a horrible one. So, Ms. Freeman, if you could talk to us today, if you could just kind of talk about the importance of credit and the importance of parents explaining, kind of filling the gap where the school system doesn't with our children.
Well, that is a great question. So credit is more important than having cash, actually, in this country, because it is used to judge your character in basically everything you do. If you want to get utilities, if you want to have cable service, internet service, insurance, if you want to become a homeowner, if you want to get a job, all of these things are dependent on your credit score. And if you don't have good role models around you to teach you about finances and to teach you about credit, then you fall prey and become a victim to the system. And sometimes people can never get out. People in their 50s and 60s and 70s are still struggling with credit because, like you said, it is not taught in the schools.
Exactly. As I was thinking about this conversation, and as I just heard you talking just now, and I heard you mention insurance, one of the things we were in our last segment, we were talking about police violence, and we were talking about African Americans who are killed all over the country. And the one thing that I always see, or the one thing I always seem to see, is that when you have an African American who's killed in a lower class, economically a low class neighborhood, the one contiguous that you see lately, and I can go back probably 2 years, is that you'll see the story about, this young person was killed, blah, blah, blah. The family has opened a GoFundMe page to take care of the funeral. And it's like even something as simple as life insurance, which is so inexpensive when you're under the age of 18. When you're that age, you could get a $20,000 term life insurance policy for your kid for $10-15 a month, but we're so ignorant in our community about life insurance and the cost of it that a lot of times we don't even get it. Then we have to turn to strangers to help us bury our family members.
Yes, you're absolutely right, and that is because we don't know about insurance, but also parents never imagine that their child will die before they do. And so they leave that responsibility to the child when they become an adult. And most adults in our community don't get insurance until they're married or until they have a child. And so that puts them at a deficit. Like you said, they have to do GoFundMe. Some people, don't even get enough money to bury their deceased relatives.
Right, and I could go on. I could go on a lot deeper into that particular conversation. But again, so just out there in terms of credit, and I've been kept very abreast of this and very and I kept up on this over the years. I used to do credit repair, but what do you normally when you come into contact and you're talking to people about repairing their credit? What are the common issues that you see that people are struggling with today?
The main barrier is that people are just afraid of things they do not know about. And so instead of trying to find out about them, they bury their head and they don't want to deal with it, hoping it will go away. But credit never goes away. That can haunt you for the rest of your life. And then many people just don't know what to do. They're paralyzed by their emotions. They're frozen. They don't know how to get out of their situation. They say they do. They say they want to take action, but they can't take that first step to get themselves out of that credit situation.
And like you said, just listening to Atiba's story, a lot of times people aren't even aware of they're not aware of what's in their credit report until they go apply for that car loan, or until they try and go get a mortgage, or until it's always seemed counterintuitive to me that people know enough about credit that they know that it's going to be accessed when it's time to pull the trigger on something, but it never sometimes occurs to this same group of people, or a subset of people out there, to be cognizant of what's in their credit report and how to take care of it and how to keep it healthy.
Right. And so, the saying ignorance is bliss. And so people just don't want to deal with that. They would rather wait until they, like you said, apply for something to find out and then take action or maybe not take action. But the most important thing is everyone should check their credit report as well as their credit score at least once a year. So you know exactly what is on your credit report, what things are impacting your credit, and then you can be an educated consumer the next time you go to purchase a home or purchase a car or apply for a loan.
And you can actually get your credit report for free every year, right?
You absolutely can. The best website I recommend is annualcreditreport.com. I know a lot of people use Credit Karma and other free websites, but I warn people about those because I also worked in IT security for 6 years. And so when a website gives you your credit report for free, you don't really know what their security measures are. And in most cases with our country nowadays, everything is a business. All of your information is sold to various companies, which is why the Facebook scandal happened. And so you just have to really be careful and protective of your information so that you don't become a victim of identity theft.
Now, you mentioned annualcreditreport.com is that you can go and access all three of your credit reports, and I've used them before, but I don't remember. Do they also provide you with your score, or do they just give you your report?
Yes, so your credit reports from Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion are free every year. Your score is about $6.95 per credit bureau. So that's about, $19 for all three.
Exactly. And for those people out there who, and again, I know this from personal experience, but most of the times if you have this is pretty much across the board, but if you have a credit card, if you have a bank account, or if you have a credit card with a bank account, I mean, a lot of times they will give you one of your three scores. I know, for example, American Express, they will provide you with your Experian score for free. I know that Capital One and Bank of America and Chase, they will all give you your TransUnion score for free, and they're giving you the FICO score.
That is correct. That was implemented a few years ago, and that is definitely an added benefit for customers. And so if you bank with one of the larger banks, the smaller banks don't usually have it, but like you said, the larger banks, you can, if you're not aware about that feature, call the bank and ask them if they offer customers their free credit score, and you can find out if you can get yours that way.
So this is Atiba again, Ms. Freeman. And again, I really appreciate the information you're giving today. And thank you for your time this afternoon. One thing I wanted to transition the conversation to make sure that we get in is to talk about wealth. There's credit and then there's wealth, right? And and we talk and it's been reported that African Americans have 1/11 the wealth of the average. An African American family has roughly 1/10 or 1/11 the wealth of the average white family, and a huge part of that component is home ownership. Because for so many people, equity in your home serves as the main source of what your wealth would be. And we've seen now time and time again these class action lawsuits where these mortgage companies and these banks are not lending to African Americans, or if they are lending to people of color, they are getting rates and programs that are not deserving of the credit that they have, and they don't get the programs that they deserve. Can you speak about the importance of home ownership, and then what we can do to guard ourselves if we suspect we're in a situation where we're not being treated fairly in the process by a bank or a lender?
Absolutely. Yes, home ownership is probably the easiest way to increase your net worth and accumulate wealth. And so credit is a direct path to home ownership even with bad credit. Many times people don't even know that they are eligible to become a homeowner. So, for example, when I purchased my home, I wanted to purchase a home, but I didn't know what the criteria was to become a homeowner. And so I took a class because I wanted to educate myself about the entire process from searching for a home all the way through closing. And I learned everything. And so I was able to go in as an educated consumer. When someone gave me an interest rate, I was able to say, no, that interest rate is too high. I have good credit. I'm not going to do business with you. And so that is the place where African Americans need to be. They need to be educated about the process, and they need to educate themselves about credit so that they do not become a victim. And if you do become a victim, you can contact the Housing and Urban Development Agency. They have free HUD counselors. There are also other organizations around NACA. If you are, I think, 50 years old or older, AARP has several resources, and you can file a complaint against a lender if you feel you have been discriminated against based on your race or based on your credit score or any other element. You can file a complaint, and you also can file a complaint with Consumer Protection Finance Bureau as well.
Yeah, you mentioned HUD, and immediately I thought of Ben Carson.
Right, you telling us we got to call him?
No, you don't have to call him. No.
I was listening to what you were saying, Ms. Freeman, and you keep saying if you have good credit, blah, blah blah blah. So for people out there, for the uninitiated, for the people out there who are listening and they're thinking about buying a car or becoming a homeowner or getting that credit card, what is a good credit score?
A good credit score at the minimum would be 700. That ensures you get a decent interest rate and decent monthly payment. Now, people may say, oh, but, I got a house or I got a home and I had that credit. Sure, you did, but your interest rate will be sometimes twice as much as someone with good credit. And you will pay more interest over the life of the loan, and your monthly payment will be higher. So I know a lot of people are anxious and they just jump out there because they want to buy a home or they want to get a credit card or get approved for a loan. But it is much better for you to work on your credit, get your score as high as it possibly can be, or get it at least to 700 so that you are not discriminated against, first thing, and then so that you get the best terms and interest rates possible. And that in itself helps you to generate wealth and become a homeowner and close the economic inequality gap.
And I like the way that you phrased that, because if you are trying to become a homeowner, if you have a lower interest rate, you might have a lower payment and better terms, but if you have a lower interest rate, more of your payment is going toward your principal. So you are in essence, when you have a lower interest rate, whether it's on a car or a home or any other piece of real property, that lower interest rate allows you to accumulate equity quicker. That's the other benefit to having a lower interest rate.
That's correct. You accumulate equity quicker, but you also pay your balance down faster.
Right. I'm saying even if you had two people that had the exact same payment, someone who's paying, just, and we'll use a $100,000, loan on a house. If you had two people that have the exact same payment, in the absence of appreciation, if one person is paying 3% interest and the other person is paying 13, the one at 3%, even if there was no appreciation in the property, that person at 3% is going to gain equity more quickly than the person who's paying 13%.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so what other tips? What are the other pitfalls out there? Because we were reading this article, Atiba and I, in preparation for this conversation, we were reading this article, and it was talking about how, the disparity of wealth between African Americans and their white counterparts. And it was talking about home ownership, but then the article said, the article was saying that more black people get turned down for a loan than the white people, or they get better, or they get worse terms. But then when they really dug down into it, they were saying that ultimately the issue is that African Americans on average have a lower credit score. And I've read the information to that effect, that white people, their FICO scores tend to be 30 to 40 points higher on average than African Americans. What do you attribute that overall lower FICO score or credit score that African Americans have?
Our spending habits. Our spending habits are what causes people to have low credit scores. White people spend their money on assets. African Americans spend their money on liabilities. So they go into debt a lot quicker. They, purchase things that are outside of their budget. They live above their means. They spend money on electronics, on clothing. They have to have the latest clothes, the latest car, the nicest furniture, the nicest wallets, go on trips. They have to live this sort of lifestyle that they cannot afford. And so white Americans have goals. They say, I want to buy a home. I want to retire age 65 or 55. I'm going to spend my money accordingly so that I can meet my goals. They live their life based on goals. We live our life from day to day.
Ooh, that's a hard one to hear.
Yeah, it is.
That's a hard one to hear, Ms. Freeman.
But again, that's something that needs to be said, because again, when we're talking about the black community having 1/10 the wealth, and again, we still have a lot of wealth, because we've seen instances where when you've gotten black people to do something in mass, whether it's boycott something, whether it's financially invest into something, the money is there to do it. So even with our little bitty 1/10 of what the white community has, we're still able to do a lot. Just imagine how much more we could do if we actually began to even the playing field. And it sounds like a lot of what you're saying is it has to start within yourself and at home.
That's exactly right. There's a song on the Black Panther soundtrack. I can't think of the name of the song, but anyway, it says that you need to be your own hero, basically. And so you need to, like you said, you need to look within. You need to improve yourself for your own self, not for anyone else. You need to be the best you that you possibly can be.
Absolutely. I think earlier in the conversation, you'd even mentioned how when you were looking to buy a home, you did something, you used two words. You said you educated yourself.
Yes.
And in 2018, all you got to do is know Google. There is no excuse for ignorance at this point. So
I'm so glad you said that. I'm so glad you said that.
I'm borrowing that from David. I can't take all the credit. He certainly said that to me more times than I can count. But the more you evaluate it, it is absolutely true. There is no reason for ignorance at this point, and we have to do better within our own community first. We can still, now don't get me wrong, I am as progressive as they come. I am all out for stamping out inequality and all that good stuff, and I'm with it. But at the same time, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can stamp out inequality, but at the same time, improve ourselves.
That's exactly right. You are absolutely right. And once you are educated, it builds up your self-esteem. It builds up your self-confidence. So now you can walk into a place. You're not fearful of, what someone says. You're not afraid of what's going to happen. You have less stress. You have less anxiety. And you are empowered to make the best decision possible for you, and if you have a family, for your family.
Last question, because I think we're almost out of time. But this is David again. I wanted to ask you one more question, just because everything you're saying is just really on point. I wonder if you would make and you kind of touched on it earlier. A lot of times people confuse what I like to call good debt and bad debt. Good debt being, getting the asset, like, a home or an investment property, or, going into debt so that you can buy stock or something like that. And the bad debt being going out and buying the depreciable assets and or buying things that are, that are consumer goods that don't have as much worth or don't have any worth other than the social worth of, showing off, like you said, clothes or cars or wallets. But if you could just kind of comment on, again, for our listeners, the difference, because you can have two people that go into debt $100,000, and one person can buy a house and the other person can go in debt $100,000, and it's all on credit cards. Talk about really quickly just the difference between, the good debt and bad debt.
Actually, I believe there is no difference. And the only case where you could say something is good debt is if you buy a home, but that is if you buy a home with good credit, with a low interest rate, with a lower monthly payment, and that is in an area that allows that property to appreciate over time.
That's see, I like that. Even you even took that answer to that question and went deeper, because a lot of people just think, oh, buy a home, but it's buying a home with a good interest rate, with a low payment, in an area that's going to appreciate. That's a really important thing that I don't think a lot of people consider when they're sometimes, trying to become a homeowner.
Yes.
We thank you so much for being on today. I really have found this conversation illuminating, and I am absolutely certain that our listeners have as well. If you could very quickly tell our listeners how they can follow you, where they can find you, and benefit again from more of your knowledge. Greatly appreciate it. Go ahead.
Absolutely. My website is Harrian Freeman, HarrienFreeman.com. I'm on Facebook, H.E. Freeman Enterprises. I also have a page, How to Get Out of Debt, Get an A credit rating for free, the name of my book. And you can find all the information on my website or on my social media pages.
We thank you so much for being on today. And certainly we'd love to have you back, and we hope you continue to be a friend of the show.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Freeman. Great conversation. That was some good information.
Yeah, we were overdue to have that conversation.
That was a gut punch, though, to say, white people have goals and
because that's really what she said. She was like, it all came down to goal. I'm going to retire at this age, so I'm going to take the steps necessary to do that. It's so funny because I spend so much time watching CNN and MSNBC, and of course, when you watch anything on television, to financial planners and BD, people that know BDOs and whatever. Right. So you see all these commercials, and I'm sitting there now, and part of me is embarrassed because I'm like, sometimes I've seen some of the commercials. I'm like, what the hell are they talking about? I don't even know what they're talking about.
Right. To your point, but even you having made that point says a lot about who you are. That you're watching, what you're consuming. They are the advertisers on the medium or in the medium that you're consuming are targeting that type of as opposed to when I used to watch there was a couple of shows I used to watch The Game on BET, right. And the commercial would always be, why you ain't graduate from high school? Why you sitting at home? Why don't you get up and go but again, to my larger point, or to my earlier point, and Ms. Freeman said the same thing. You've got to want to take that journey to do better,
right?
Instead of just being complacent with where you are and not wanting to, so a lot of it is fear, a lot of it is ignorance, but we've got to do better.
We're going to leave it there, good people. We thank you so much for being with us today on Humanity in the Headlines. We want to thank all of our listeners and viewers, everyone on Facebook Live, on IntellectualRadio.com, on YouTube. We thank you so much for joining us today. Whatever medium you use to join us, we thank you. All our Facebook Live watchers, if you could, again, share the show, we greatly appreciate it. We want to thank Mr. Breon Jones, our producer, for, again, another wonderful show. And of course, we thank Mr. Earl Winfrey for this wonderful platform. And everyone, have a safe and wonderful Easter. It's going to be cold tomorrow. Don't think it's going to be nice. So dress warmly and appropriately. And again, enjoy your holiday. Have a great weekend, everybody.